The opinions expressed in the following program do not necessarily reflect those of Invisible Wounds or Wightman. Please be aware that the content of Fireside Chats with Deborah may contain sensitive subjects such as suicide, grief, violence, PTSD, and other mental health conditions. By discussing these subjects, we will decrease stigma, bring awareness, and hope. If you need support, please reach out to trusted contacts, family, friends, call your doctor, or go to the closest emergency department. Call helplines such as Boots on the Ground at 1-833-677-BOOT. We hope this series helps build self-confidence in you. On today's show, Douglas Pflug, Executive Leadership Coach, Finding Your Granite.
G'day, Doug.
Hello, how are you today?
I'm well, thank you, and I'm so happy to have you join us today. Doug, I didn't introduce you with your last name, and part of that is because my hesitancy with pronunciation. Would you please do that for me?
Sure, my name is Douglas Pflug.
Douglas, thank you. And for the viewers, I think it's important too, because in fact, you've authored a book, and if they're going to talk about you, then they can do it more accurately. But to start off with, Doug, I wanted to acknowledge the fact that you were a speaker with Invisible Wounds a number of years ago, and that's how we connected. And I really appreciate the fact that over the years, we have maintained connections with each other, and I've followed your trail with some awesome kind of respect for the direction that it's taken. And I want to thank you for that.
I can't thank you enough. One thing I've never told you is that when we did that Invisible Wounds about 9 years ago, that really unleashed a fire in my belly to talk about my story and to be vulnerable, just to help others. So this book is a direct reflection of the efforts and the time that you invested in me. And all the people that we will help with the sales of the book is directly related to your reaching out to me. And we were strangers then, but now we've become really good friends. So thank you. You're a huge part of the beginnings of the book.
Oh, well, thank you for that compliment. Didn't know that, but yeah, that's pretty awesome. So where should we start? Well, let's see. Well, I'm going to leave that up to you. Where would you like to start this? We've got about a half an hour, and the focus is to assist first responders and their families with some of the challenges that come about with being in a relationship. So I'm just going to turn it over to you.
I think the best way to frame this for our viewers is the fact that I'm 56 years of age. I was raised, the teenagers in the 80s. And back then it was a pretty neat time, but there was that whole toxic masculinity perspective where real men don't cry, suck it up, buttercup. And if you showed any emotion or specifically vulnerability, they questioned your manhood and all that type of crap as it's turned out to be. I'm really happy to see that in life, even though we haven't fixed it, we've moved light years away from that, where real men do cry, and real men, as how people want, or however you want to identify, they can be vulnerable. And it's not a sign of weakness. Actually, it's a sign of a superpower, because for us to reflect in ourselves and come to the self-realization that we're not perfect and we need help, well, that's the biggest step for any type of addiction or any type of mental health issue. Is the admission. And once you admit that, then you can understand your why, as Simon Sinek would say. And once we understand our why, we know how and what to do to make ourselves better. And that's been the whole backline behind this whole book and my whole life.
Right. So Doug, you've kind of touched on the fact of mental health, mental illness. I kind of like the term mental challenges that people have. But so are you okay with doing a little bit of disclosure about your own experience with, on your life's journey? Because I know that you've had some challenges yourself.
Yes, I'm honored. When I was born, within a week, I had major surgery. I still have a 13-inch scar on my stomach today. At that time, the doctors told my parents to say goodbye. They didn't think I was going to come through. Luckily, I did. At the age of 2, I was starting to get these unexplained bruising and all around my body. And as a retired police officer, one can only imagine if someone were to come into my family home and see all the bruising, what they might speculate. But it turned out that I had a rare blood disease called idiosyncratic thrombocytopenic purpura, or something along those lines. And I was losing the physical battle. The doctor put me on some experimental drugs back in '68, I think it was. And again, once my parents were called back in, and the doctor said, say goodbye to him because we don't think he's going to make it. Clearly, I'm a Christian, and my parents are, and a lot of prayer and some phenomenal doctors, I'm here today. It kind of sparked a lifelong, I think, predisposed ability for resiliency. Physically, I was too young to really understand or even remember those things. But I think, those early childhood years of me fighting for my life set up a phenomenal template that I would later rely on through the different trials and tribulations as I move forward. Went to grade school. Because of the medications I was on, I was a little bit chubby. I had a grade 7 teacher who just rocked my world and destroyed me, calling me Fatty Pflug. When he learned that we didn't live in an area that he liked, he called me a piece of welfare trash and told me that I'd never amount to anything. That was extremely devastating, for a 13-year-old boy. And I believed that I was Fatty Pflug, and I believed that I was garbage for quite some time. And I remember going into high school in grade 9, all my buddies were signing up for football, wrestling, track. I didn't play sports in grade 9 because I believed I was a piece of garbage. Then this incredible man, God rest his soul, John Cater, saw me playing touch football with the guys at the end of grade 9. He said, "Son, you got to come out for football." And he unleashed an opportunity where I started to come into my own. I grew. I was one of those boys that kind of grew wide before I grew tall. And, right. Today I stand 6'1", 240, but had John Cater not come into my life and show me that I did have value, I don't know that I'd be here today.
Yeah. And, very respectful of you to acknowledge the fact of, various individuals in your life that have had a positive influence, as well as those who have not, because I just think it puts a real light and reality and truth that other people might readily relate to. So thank you once again for doing that. So continuing on, maybe with the football, I mean, you have so many accolades that have been given to you. There's, acknowledgments from, football is one. There's awards that you've been given. So, yeah. But there's also that other side where you've had some struggles. So how do you balance the two? Or maybe
really
sorry.
No, I really had to learn to come into my own. And I go back to the resiliency that I was forced to face to save my life at a young age. By the time I was in grade 12 and 13, I really came into my own. I was playing football, wrestling, track. I was being recruited by universities I went to high school at the Waterloo Collegiate Institute. And one thing when we talk here, we'll always say the names and identify the positives in my life because they deserve the notoriety. They deserve to have the name behind the experience, but I'll never say negative people because they created a situation that I fought, but they don't deserve the same billboard billing in my life, just to kind of preface that. I had a friend, Ram Tumker, and Ram was not a mainstream kid, but he was my friend, and I used to walk him home from the bus stop all the time because some of the kids picked on him. And, right. It was really neat because after football practice, wrestling, track, he would always wait for me because I became almost like a bodyguard to him. And walking him to the bus stop was very important to me. I remember walking home after, I think it was grade 12. I said, "Hey, buddy, I'm going to be the captain of the football wrestling and track team next year. You're going to be with me. We're going to ride this grade 13 together." That summer, my world was rocked when I was actually going to summer school yet again for math because I'm not strong in math. And back then, when you listen to the AM/FM radio, they'd say, "We interrupt this program to announce." And I was advised that he and his sister blew up in the Air India crash. And all the efforts that I had in my life to save him or protect him or promote him were in vain because he died at the hands of a terrorist act. And at that time, I was at 18, 19. It really rocked my world. And at that point, it's when I started to get my calling that I can't let this devastate me. I have to get this to motivate me. And I'd always wanted to either be a teacher or a police officer, but that's when I really designed myself and really realized that I want to go in there and be a positive male role model in the lives of people everywhere I can. I wanted to be a voice for those people that were silenced by bullying, addictions, or what have you. And that's where I knew that I was going to be a police officer one day after I went through my athletic pursuits to get to that point. So, again, it was a very horrific experience in an 18-year-old boy's life. And I was a boy at that mind. But again, we understand what happened, but then we know what we need to move forward. And that's how when I've written the book, I can't change what happened in my life or in society. I can only learn from that because who we were no longer exists because of who we are today. But who we were formulates and creates who we are today. But who we are today is going to be who we were yesterday. So it's that pursuit of who you want to be moving forward.
Right.
And as much as some of these bad things have come into my life, I'm not a masochist, but I'm glad they did, because some of the best successes that I've ever had in life were the flip side of some of the worst horrific failures that I'd ever have. So, it's one of those things that even if something bad happens now, I look at it, what am I going to learn from this, and where am I going to be in 6 months? And that helps me get through some of the tough times.
So, Doug, as a first responder, and you don't have to go into a lot of detail, but you acknowledge you have lived experience. You've had some number of situations that have hurt you physically, perhaps psychologically. Can you elaborate on that a little bit for our viewers?
Well, I served 28 and a half years with the Guelph Police Service, an incredible organization. And it was funny because back in around 2006, they launched this thing called EAP, the Employee Assistance Program. A lot of people didn't know about it, but again, there was still that thought process, well, I'm never going to tell people how I feel. Well, I was a road sergeant, and I was involved with an incredible platoon of people. I was by Stone Road Mall. We had a call that there was a child in medical distress. When I got there, some of my officers were trying to provide life-saving efforts towards this child. My role there was as the sergeant, the road sergeant. I had to, scene control and all that type of stuff. But sadly, she didn't make it that day. Subsequent days, they enlisted the EAP critical incident debrief. A lot of us went there, but I began to suffer in silence. I had an early thing in my career, probably 10 years before that, where I was laughed at because I cried at the scene where a child had died. And some of the old terrible officers, challenged my masculinity, made fun of me because I cried. So at that point, I began to shut down and think, well, I guess real men don't cry. And I tried to be someone that I wasn't. In 2007, after my mom, who's 5 feet tall, and again, when I said my size, came to see me, I was self-medicating with alcohol. It wasn't to get drunk. It was just to fall asleep because I was just waking up and I couldn't sleep. And I got some help, and I met this amazing lady who we're still friends to this day, Mary Margaret, and I went through the Employee Assistance Program, and she taught me that there is light in my life. And I was in the pit of darkness. I had some suicidal ideologies. I was planning that in my mind. And she taught me that when we're in the pit of darkness, you will eventually find granite. And don't look at the pit of darkness on the walls for that light switch. That light switch comes from within. And it was based on my faith, my Christianity, and my 4 core values of honor, integrity, passion, and accountability. And that's where, when I did write the book, I've called it Finding Your Granite, my 4 cornerstones of personal leadership, because in the pit of darkness, Mary Margaret helped me navigate through that. And on the flip side, here we are now, and we've already donated, I think, almost close to $7,000 to veterans and everyday heroes. And I'm so proud that about a month and a half ago, we bought a third of a service dog for a Canadian veteran. So they're no longer suffering in silence. They've got that canine friend to help them navigate some of their tragedies and memories and their future. So I'm so proud that I've taken 100% of the proceeds of this book. It's not for me. It's not self-gratifying. It's to give to others, because at the base level, from the beginning days with RAM all the way through my entire life, I have a service heart. And I want to serve and protect in any way I can. And this is just another extension of that, which really makes me proud of myself.
Yeah, good. So Doug, I hear you, and I hear you talk about being proud of yourself, and I think that's wonderful. But I know there's some first responders out there who aren't always so proud of themselves. Do you have any words of experience that you could share with them? And I'm not sure if you can kind of read my mind or not. But
Well, for me, it was the way I was raised, the career that I was in, the way that I look, the way that I feel. And for me, the hardest thing was putting my pride and my ego aside and realizing that I can't save the world. And a lot of first responders get into the job, as I did in 1989, thinking, I'm going to solve the world. And you set yourself up to fail. And that was one thing Mary Margaret said that to me, that I've been a perfectionist my entire life, and I'm still a perfectionist, but I'm not a perfectionist in the result anymore, because sometimes we are meant to fail in life because we need to learn from that failure, or we need to not even fail, but just not win. And for me, being an elite athlete, it was about win, get the W, get the W. And the hardest thing that I did is my entire life, I set myself up to fail because I was not meant to win everything that I went into. And that was the neatest revelation she did with me. So I'm still a perfectionist now, but I'm a perfectionist in my attempt. You know, it's one of those things that control what you can to put a positive spin on the things you can't. But for me and any first responder out there, realize that it's okay to hurt. It's okay to cry. You've got to self-reflect, and you've got to stop putting yourself in a position where you're setting yourself up to fail. We are not meant to win all these things. And that's why I speak publicly. I've done the book that sometimes when people hear my story, they're like me, maybe I can be like Doug, and maybe I can go through that process of self-realization, realizing I'm not a robot. I'm not a superhero. You know, I've done things in my career that, you know, we'll always say that with first responders, we run into chaos where other people run away from it. That's fine, but we have to take care of ourselves sometimes before we take care of others.
Yeah, I really enjoyed reading the book, and what I liked is the personality that shows through it, the pictures and the, I guess, like I said, the honesty that you wrote with. It just grabbed me as soon as I started reading. So, yeah, where do people get the book? I mean, I know where I got it, but
yeah, right now I know it's being sold at the River Bookstore in Amherstburg. It's on Amazon. Amazon's got some crazy pricing. I don't know how they figure it out, but the best way where I get to Amazon, with all honesty, I get 8% of the sales back. That goes to charity. The best way is to email me through riseupandexcel.ca, or my Instagram is ironwell360. The book is $40. If it's shipping, it's usually $5. But with that, I get to give basically $15 to $20 to the charity versus 8%. Because when I buy them from the publisher, the more I buy, the greater the discount I get.
Right.
So if people want to get the book, I would really encourage them to just riseupandexcel.ca, send me a message, and we'll get you one in your hands right away. And the best thing with that is I'm going to personalize it and give you a special message. Just as one, thank you for your support, and then some words of encouragement so I can practice what I teach. But I truly appreciate the assistance of so many people. I think we've sold about 400 books through myself and online. And I'd love to one day get up to 1,000 so we can really maximize our donation to veterans and everyday heroes.
Win-win, eh?
You got her, my friends.
Yes, okay. All right, if we could switch over a few minutes, because there's one thing that in the years that I've been doing conferences and things like that has really come up is how being a first responder impacts relationships. Any comments on that?
Yeah,
you're still
definitely.
a young man, but you've had some relationships, I know.
Well, and I'm honest to say I've had 2 divorces. I'm currently married to an incredible lady. She is a retired sergeant herself.
Right.
And, you know, I'm glad, and it sounds weird, but I'm glad I went through those divorces because they taught me how to be a better person. You know, as a young man, when you get married, when you're 21, 22, what do we really know about life, right? Or young person, forget that I'm identifying as a male. But Michelle and I have 3 rules in our relationship that she created, because I always joke that she's the smart one and I just lift stuff. But the first one, you know, we would go sometimes I had a 4-week schedule. She had a 5-week schedule. So we theoretically go sometimes 7 to 10 days without seeing each other. Right. So our rule that we've done through the 13 years we've been together, and we just celebrate our 10th wedding anniversary.
Congratulations.
Is that, you know, it's just fantastic that we never end the date we're on till we plan the next date. You know, and for us, that's really important because, like, you and I have been trying to meet for coffee for the longest time. Okay. If we don't meet for coffee, it's not critical, but, you know, it's something that should happen. But you can't do that to your partner or your spouse, however you choose to call that person. You owe it to them to be present in their life. And when you're on that date, it gives you something to celebrate that, hey, we're together. But, you know, when we set the date for the next date, it gives us something to look forward to when we miss each other. The second rule that we have that Michelle came home with, and this is a tough one, especially when you've got 2 first responders, is that the one day I came home and I was talking about a situation and Michelle was giving me advice and I didn't want that. And she said, well, and we got not into a conflict, but she's like, look, I keep giving you advice. I'm like, I didn't want you to give me advice. I wanted you to just listen. Boom. She said, then why didn't you tell me that? So when you're in a situation with any relationship, when you come home and you want to talk with your significant other, our rule is, I just want you to listen, or I want you to help me solve this. because I can't come home and set Michelle up to fail by asking her or expecting her to listen when she wants to help me, and vice versa. So those are very, very important things. And then the other thing we do is we'll come home and we'll only talk about work for 10 or 15 minutes, then we'll leave it at work. You know, when I started policing, the whole thought process was you're a cop 24/7. It doesn't work. You've got the knowledge of a police officer 24/7 that will help you guide your personal life. But if you don't leave work at work and you bring it home, you're bringing all that negative, toxic situation where you're seeing the worst things human beings can do into a beautiful home, and you're poisoning your home. And you owe it to your family to try to leave that at work. They always talk about getting ready for work as a first responder. I agree with that, and I subscribe to that, and I teach that. But once this shift is done, you got to get ready to go back home and be you. Because at the end of the day, our loved ones aren't with us because we're a police, fire, ambulance, military. They're with us because of the person that we are. The police, fire, ambulance, military, those are just hats we wear. But again, much like a baseball hat, when it's not sunny outside, you put it in the closet, you leave it there, and you go back to being who you are as the person.
Oh, that's really great. Yes, and I want to thank you for that, because in past seminars that we've had presentations with husbands and wives, and they talk about the importance of communication. They talk about some of the realities of being with the first responder, that, you know, it might start out all rosy and then it becomes a bit complicated because of not being sure what the expectations are, especially if it's a first responder and not a first responder. So that communication bit, making a plan, you know, realizing that people have stressful or traumatic experiences and they come home, you know, not quite ready to talk, and all that type of thing. So it sounds like
the other thing that I would encourage. Sorry. The other thing I would encourage is, if you've got a partner or a spouse who isn't a first responder, before you go into a critical situation, come home with that knowledge, ask them what level they want to come in on the story. Because, you know, for me, and this is one thing that at the beginning in my failed marriage, is if I came home and I started talking the base level, by the time I got to the point where I really needed help, I was just too tired. When I would come home and say to Michelle, I've had this call, she could go right to that memory bank, and then we could tweak the little 2% that we needed to help. But again, also realize that if your spouse works in the bank and they've had a bad day, when they come home and talk to you about that, that doesn't mean that their bad day was any worse than your bad day. You both had a bad day, so you've got to respect that and keep it in context. I have heard couples that I've assisted. I had a bad day at work. I came home. My significant other, who was a first responder, said, "Are you kidding me? I had 3 people die, and you're talking about a rude customer?" That's the first way that you're going to start to divide a wedge in that relationship. So make sure you realize that if your loved one wants to share a bad day, it is their bad day, and it's not in competition with your bad day.
Corrections is reaching out for help, and there's just a lot of things going on, which is very positive. Paramedics are still suffering, and the communications is still suffering, but they're trying to get help.
And I'm glad you mentioned corrections, and I'm sorry I didn't speak about them. I've got a lot of friends who do that job. I wouldn't want it. You know, when you look at it, when I was on the road, I'd deal with 1, 3, 4, 5 bad people at a time. They go into ranges where they're 60 and 70. They go into terrible situations. And I'm really glad that you talked about communicators as well, the 911 dispatchers. When you, that's the hidden hero on the other end of the phone. And the thing that I've dealt a lot in my last 4.5 years as a sergeant, I dealt with communicators. I supervised that unit. And the thing I never realized is when you look at that hot call for service, you know, as an officer, you've got the amygdala hijack, you spike, you go to the call for service, then over the next 8 to 10 hours, you arrest the bad person, then you've got your paperwork. And then you can de-escalate, you can get rid of that amygdala hijack. But a 911 dispatcher does the domestic, then they do a murder, then they do this, then they do this. So they could be, as I call, in a state of suspended amygdala hijack for anywhere from 8 to 12 hours of their whole shift. Yeah. So we have to have special appreciation for those hidden heroes on the other end of the phone. They have an incredible job. And, their main purpose is they're investigators. They want to find out the who, what, when, where, why to help the officer formulate their plan when they go to the call for service or the fire or the ambulance. But then again, we got to protect them because they're trying to protect us. So we have to make sure that we include them in this group.
So Doug, I'm really aware that you have the capability of taking something negative and looking and bringing it into a positive light. Do you want to elaborate to the viewers on that and the how-to, perhaps?
Oh, for sure. One of the things that I've learned over the years is we can't control what happens to us, only what we can or how we respond to it. I'm not going to give up too much, but there's 3 really good stories at the end of the book, and the chapter's called No Means Next Opportunity. As we go through life, a lot of times we get the word no, and it's almost like to take from Admiral McRaven. As we complete each successful task of each day, it's almost like building a sidewalk with different paving stones. And as we walk on there, every positive thing that happens, we put a paving stone down and we move further and further and further. Sometimes in life, we get to a situation where, my God, boom, there's this massive wall in front of us. The word no means you can't do something. What I like to encourage people to do is to take 1 or 2 steps back to those positions of previous success, look at that wall and realize it's only 3 feet wide. And all you need to do is take a step to the right or the left, and then you can go around that wall. I've had the privilege of mentoring 3 incredible people. There was a professional football player, an Olympian, and a friend of mine who was about 425 pounds. When we went through the whole mentorship process, we taught them that no means your next opportunity. And it was going from a position of negativity, bad thoughts about yourself, and just bad experiences, that when you flip it over to the positive lens, you can accomplish some incredible things. And down the road, as you'll read at the end of the book, 3 people were extremely successful. When they, at the beginning, were devastated, they thought their life was over in their own spheres of influence. But always remember that no doesn't mean it's done. Use that as next opportunity and challenge yourself. Much like I said earlier today, you are going to not be successful. You might fail, you might stumble, you might fall. But as they say, it's not what knocks you down that's important, what helps get you up. But if you can take the positive lens of saying, okay, I can't control what happened. What am I going to learn from this, and how am I going to be better 6 months down the road? I think that gives you a micro opportunity to work towards something. And that's the last thing I would say for any first responder. As you prepare for retirement 10 years out, make sure you retire to something as opposed to retiring from something. Because retiring to is inspiration, and it gives you something to look forward to, and realize that there is 30, 35 years in the pit of darkness when you're starting at 21, 22. Hopefully you're going to have another 30 years of life. So retire to an exciting time, reward yourself, and set that up that down the road, that when you finally hang up your keys, your cruiser keys, your ambulance keys, or whatever keys you have, you're retiring to something, and you live that life that you've earned through the pit of darkness that you've worked through for so many years.
Excellent, excellent. Just 3 brief sentences on what you and Michelle are doing in retirement to have enjoyment.
Well, we just got a brand new puppy. Her name is Arizona. She's our service dog for us. Puppies, boating, and travel.
Okay. There you go. Lovely. Thank you. Thank you very much. Doug, do you do public speaking now?
Yeah, I've done not as much as I would like to. But for me, it's not about getting paid for it. All I ask is when I go there is that they just buy a copy of the book for each person in the audience, and I'll cover the gas or whatever. But I don't want public speaking fees, because for me, that kind of reduces my message and my service heart. So all I ask is people buy a book, because they're going to hear the story, and they're going to be wondering about it. And if the venues can just buy a copy of the book, people can leave with it, and they're going to hear me speak. And then when they read the book, much like you've done, you can hear my voice through, because you've seen the presentation. So I would welcome it. They could just get a hold of me through the website, riseupandexcel.ca, and we'll try to work it out.
Great. Good luck. I like that idea. Okay. Thank you very much for joining us today. And my best wishes to both of you as you move forward. You know that. And darn it, let's get together for coffee. Let's make it happen.
Next time I get to town, I will definitely do that, my friend.
Invisible Wounds will host events promoting mental wellness to first responders, their families, and civilians. To find out more, please visit our website at invisible-wounds.ca.